3 years after this behemoth came out, we had Pokemon Stadium, a 3D battle-style arena that allowed you to pit your Pokemon against each other that you built from Pokemon Blue, Red, and Yellow. Something like this was absolutely unheard of at the time, and with Pokemania engulfing the world and its Pokemon, and still now, we see a return of the beautiful Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo Switch Online service. And with that, we have to compare it to the Nintendo 64 version because there's a lot of features that have been removed. Well, naturally, and we'll go into why. So with that, we have to talk about the main marketing gimmick of Pokemon Stadium, the Transfer Pack. A pack that went under the Nintendo 64 controller. It allowed you to take your cartridge from Blue, Red, and Yellow, put it in the Transfer Pack, and copy over your Pokemon, including their levels, their IVs, and their statuses. You saw in real time your Pokemon you built up on the big screen, and you can play against your friend doing the exact same thing. That is incredible and going way beyond the link capabilities of anything the Game Boy can do, to see your Pokemon that you've built on the big screen. And naturally on the Nintendo Switch service, we're going to see this feature removed because of that physical hardware limitation. There is no way that at this point in time you can play your Pokemon Blue, Red, and Yellow, or anything hardware, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But for now, we're going to talk about more of the Transfer Pack and why that's such a big deal. When you go into the main menu of Pokemon Stadium, you see the different modes here, such as the gyms to fight the Elite Four, you see the stadiums with all the cups, as well as the GB Tower. Well, yes, it is true, all of these functionalities will have you using registered Pokemon. You can use the Pokemon that you've built from Blue, Red, and Yellow into here. And this is the big problem that we'll have. Because that functionality is removed, half of the game that you would expect to be a lot of fun is also removed. You'll have to resort to pre-registered Pokemon that have their own movesets that were curated by the developers, and that's where the problems begin. You're going to be battling a lot of different enemies here, and while you don't have your Pokemon that you built up, and these curated Pokemon might not suffice against some of the harder gym battles, especially when you have to fight the Elite Four. Even as a kid getting here with my original Nintendo 64 copy, I had to use my Pokemon that I built up just to get by. And that was not an easy thing to do, and I can't even imagine doing that with registered Pokemon, but hey, that's what we have to face at this moment in time. I think the mode Stadium Cup will also bring light and why it's sad to see that the Transfer Pack functionality has been removed. There are 4 cups that I mentioned previously, going from Petite all the way to level 100, and this is reminiscent to your journey in the original Pokemon games. As you start to play the game, you also start to transfer Pokemon of that level to Stadium, and you can use those to fight in each of those cups. If anything, Pokemon Stadium provided a testament of your journey, and it also gave more expansion of the original Blue, Red, and Yellow, which is exactly why having these features removed pretty much kills half of the experience that was initially advertised. Even features like the Game Boy Tower are completely gone. Well, yes, the original functionality is there, but because of the physical hardware, you can't use the tower, and in essence, you won't be able to hear anything like this. Granted, the Nintendo 64 capabilities of playing Pokemon Blue were pretty terrible considering that the quality has a lot of artifacting, the pixels aren't sharp as well, and even some pretty terrible audio distortion in comparison to the Super Game Boy. Let's take a look. Digression and speculation on this point, Twitter user Luigi Blood has officially confirmed that the NSO version of Metroid Fusion does have link capabilities. It's not working, mind you. Nintendo accidentally left that functionality in there, but how does that pertain to the Pokemon Stadium and games? It is very possible Nintendo could put this functionality back when they put Pokemon Blue, Red, and Yellow, if they do, into the NSO Game Boy of the games. But like I said, that is speculation and that's a stretch, but it just goes to show you that if we did have that functionality here, we could have the full potential of Stadium in one console, and that's a pretty cool thing to have. But I hope you get what I'm trying to say here. While Pokemon Stadium in itself using pre-registered Pokemon is a fine experience, the fact that you won't be able to transfer your original Pokemon to this game is pretty much half of the fun. So you're only going to get half of what you're expecting in this version. So expect no Pokemon transfers or no transfer packs abilities at this point in time. But going into how the game performs and looks, it actually looks pretty decent. As usual, Nintendo put a smoothing filter and upscaled this to the resolution of the Switch, so the 3D models look absolutely beautiful, and they're rendered even better than they were on the Nintendo 64 version. However, because of the smoothing filter, the 2D text and images look pretty terrible. A lot of the text is illegible, especially when you're seeing some of the text from your rivals. Being able to read some of the attacks looks horrendous at best. And I've actually had an awful experience trying to know what is what just because the text and the font is so smudged. You can see right here a comparison of how some of the attacks look on the Nintendo 64 version compared to the NSO, and you can see why that's actually a significant problem too. I would argue to say that this is actually the worst looking NSO game in terms of 2D text and images. There's no other Switch Online version game that has something as bad as this, and it's pretty illegible. I've said this before, I really hope that Nintendo has options to put different filters, such as sharper pixels or any other smoothing filters to make the game look a little better, but as of now, it looks really terrible. But the consistent 30 FPS is a really nice thing to have. The original Pokemon Stadium, when releasing some of your first Pokemon and using their attacks, did lag the game significantly. A great example right here is when you're summoning Ghastly. You throw him in and the game actually starts to dip pretty significantly. Going into his Nightshade attack does the same thing, and even with other Pokemon as well. But the Switch Online version keeps a consistent 30 FPS. It doesn't matter what Pokemon you're throwing out or what attack you do, it will keep that consistent 30 FPS. So performance-wise, it's significantly better than the original, and even then I was surprised to see this game run so nicely in comparison, since I'm so used to the N64 and how much it lags. So that was a really great surprise, actually. And as I touched in other NSO games, God, lag it's still here, man. A lot of NSO games do have lag, including Ocarina of Time and other games that are sensitive to timed inputs. While it is very true, Pokemon Stadium has no timed inputs and it's a turn-based game, so lag is of minimal importance, except for the party games. I didn't touch upon this because I wanted to bring this up in the lag section of the video, but yeah, when you're playing some of the party games, you're going to see a significant amount of lag, more specifically on the Metapod stages. Pressing A in this party game allows Metapod or Kakuna to harden, and those are timed very specifically. On the N64 version, you can get this almost every time. On the NSO, my god, you can't do it at all. You have to time it awkwardly, and you're going to be getting it wrong every time. The Ekans party game is also another example of analog not working as good as it could. It doesn't matter if you flick your analog lightly or heavily, you're not going to get Ekans to get on the Digletts properly. And that was something that I actually did have a problem with, because I always felt the party games fully utilized everything that the Nintendo 64 controller could do, and I don't think the NSO version does a good job of this. Case in point, the Pokemon Stadium experience is not going to be as good as you remember for a couple reasons. There's no way to transfer any of your Pokemon from your original game, so you're left with pre-registered Pokemon, making the game more difficult than it needs to be, and reducing a lot of the functionality of the game. Lots of lag also makes enjoying some of the party games that much more difficult, and because of the smoothing filter, some of the text can be pretty terrible to see. If anything, this is not a good port of Pokemon Stadium because of those reasons. And yes, it's true, I don't know how Nintendo's going to implement a transfer pack functionality, even if they do, but even then, you're not going to get that here, and you're just much better off playing off the original because of that functionality. Granted though, I know that statement is one of luxury because Pokemon Blue and Stadium are going up in price as well as the other games, so getting these in 2023 is not the easiest experience. But if you do have access to these, I would highly recommend playing the original over the Switch because of that functionality. That functionality is what makes Stadium what it is. But those are my opinions on Pokemon Stadium. On the Nintendo 64 and NSO, you'll really see a lot of the differences, and I hope you feel the same way. And if not, let me know in the comments below to see what you think about Pokemon Stadium and how you're going to play it. Thank you guys so much. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Anything, I want to say thank you to these guys right here for supporting the channel financially. But if you also want to see what other videos that I've done Pokemon-wise, or maybe not, right here, you can see all the other videos that I've made. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you very soon.